Hello, everybody. Welcome to this virtual briefing brought to you by the Cybersecurity Collaborative. I'm Todd Fitzgerald. I'm the Vice President of Cybersecurity Strategy and the Chairman of the Executive Committee for the Collaborative. And it's my pleasure to be here today with Dawn Cappelli, who is the VP of Global Security and Chief Information Security Officer for Rockwell Automation. Welcome, Dawn.
Thanks, Todd.
Glad to have you here. We're looking forward to an exciting hour here. Dawn has just a great background. For those of you that don't know Dawn, Dawn, not only is she at Rockwell Automation, but she's also the founder of the Carnegie Mellon Insider Threat Risk Mitigation Center with US CERT. And that's such a very, very important topic. And Dawn has been leading this effort, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. What we want to focus on today in these leadership profiles are things that help with the leadership of our members and those that want to be members in the future. One of the things that the collaborative does very well is bring CISOs together to share insights and work together as a community. We do this through having CISO rapid responses, task force meetings to work on specific issues. We have morning security reports, which are a curated list of security items that are ad-free to bring those things to the top of your mailbox. Virtual briefings such as this, along with private CISO boardrooms on different topics. And then access to an extensive tool library that has tools that were approved by other CISOs and used in their organization. We also have access to the Leadership Development Program, which was developed by General Colin Powell in the Professional Leadership Academy, Development Academy. So without further ado, Dawn, how did you get into cybersecurity?
Well, I started out my career programming nuclear power plants for Westinghouse. And so back then, nobody really thought about security, which is kind of scary.
With a nuclear power plant as well,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. So then I went to Carnegie Mellon University, and I still was doing various software engineering projects. And I happened to work on one in like 99 and 2000 for the Center for Disease Control, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, and the National Guard. And we were creating a prototype of a portal for collaboration in the event of a bioterrorism event. This was very cool back then. This was, the internet back then was not what it is now. And creating a portal for live collaboration, video exchange, during something like a terrorism event was really leading edge and a lot of fun. But it occurred to me that we probably should be thinking about security. And so I thought, I think I'll start getting involved in security. And CERT, the very first security organization in the world, was located at Carnegie Mellon University. It was created in 1988 when the first internet worm hit. And Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute was key in responding to that internet worm. So I thought, I'm going to get a job in CERT. So I applied and I got a job in CERT. And that's how I entered the security community.
Well, and of course, we would never have anything like some sort of a bioterrorism event or a pandemic or anything like that would make use of any of those products, right?
Right. Who would have thought?
Yeah. So I mean, so that really was leading edge at the time, wasn't it?
It was, and it was a lot of fun. But yes, whoever would have thought we would be in this situation today?
Yeah. And what is it that you think, set you up for success? Was it education? Did you have a mentor? Was it curiosity?
I honestly think it was finding that thing in life that I was passionate about. I loved programming. I loved the technical challenge. I found that to be fun. I would work on whatever my job was, and 18 months later, I'd finish that system and go to the next, look for a new job, doing something different. That was fun. But when I started working in security, it became more than fun and interesting. It became part of who I am. And, I dream about security at night, which is very sad, but, it's much more than a job. In fact, someone said to me recently, obviously, security to you is not your job, it's your vocation. And that is how I feel about it.
And I just want to tell people while we're here at the end of this, we will have time for some chat questions. So if you want to put your questions into chat, we'll try to get through as many of those as we can. So what was it? So programming and security are so different. Even though I think a lot of people think, well, security is just this IT issue. What is it about security that really gravitated you towards that away from the programming side?
Well, when I was working on that bioterrorism portal, we had sort of like a tabletop. We actually filmed, had people role playing, students from CMU pretending that they were victims of an attack. And it really hit me that, what if this really did happen? And we needed to have all of these different people, the CDC, hospitals, grocery stores, and pharmacies. We even talked about school nurses. Like, how do you find the early indicators that you could have a bioterrorism event happening? And I just realized, well, wait a second, but there's an adversary out there. There's someone that may want to come into that portal and either destroy the information or put misinformation in there. And so it just became apparent that security was really important. And then I got that job at CERT, and I knew nothing about security. My goal was to learn about it. And so they made me the project manager for a new project. CERT is a federal lab, and so they mainly get federal funding for research and development work. So they had just gotten a contract from the Secret Service, and the Secret Service back then, their protective mission was mainly gates, guards, and guns. It was physical security. But they realized that cyber could have an impact on physical security. And so they needed to start thinking about how should we incorporate cyber into our protective mission. And so this job that I took at CERT, my job was to lead this team that would work with the Secret Service to figure that out. And the first event that we had to protect was the Salt Lake City Olympics in February of 2002. So how cool, how can you not be passionate about that? What a fun thing to do. So I took that job on August 1st, 2001, and thought, this is so cool. This is so fun. I can't believe I am getting paid for this. And then a month and a half later, 9/11 happened. And suddenly that cool, fun job became very serious. And so I think that has something to do with why I am so passionate about security as well, because of that, that how I got thrust into it in the midst of such turbulent times.
Well, and it seems that you've tied this to really some real events that had, real impact, in protecting lives around, with the Salt Lake City Olympics, and was that a big driver for you?
It was. Once 9/11 happened and that cool, fun job changed to very serious and very real. what a responsibility. It was really scary. And I'm going to jump ahead to one of your questions you were going to ask me later, because they really thought the Olympics would be the next target. And so here I am. I had taken this job, committed to being the project leader for this project, and had committed to going to Salt Lake City during the Olympics and being there side by side with the Secret Service. And now this terrorist event happens, and they think that the Olympics is going to be the next target. And I, at the time, had an 11-year-old and a 16-year-old. And what a dilemma. Later, you were going to ask me about personal adversity. So sorry, Todd, I'm skipping ahead.
It's fine.
But what a dilemma. I just felt like I'm a mom. I can't put my life in danger and go to Salt Lake City with the Secret Service. I just can't do it. I can't take a chance on leaving my kids to be orphans. Well, not orphans. I have a wonderful husband and they have a wonderful father. But I had to go to my brand new boss. I'd been on the job a month and a half. I had to go to my brand new boss, Tom Longstaff, who I will be forever grateful to. I said, Tom, you hired me to do a job and I can't do it. I just can't go to Salt Lake City during the Olympics. I can't leave my kids. And so you can fire me because I'm not able to do the job you hired me for. And he said, Dawn, we didn't hire you to take a bullet for the president. You work for Carnegie Mellon University. We will have plenty of people in CERT that will want to be at the Olympics. If you are willing to do all the advanced trips and help us get everything set up, and you can run things from here in Pittsburgh, it will be perfectly fine. And it was perfectly fine. But that, when you had that question about personal adversity, and that was probably one of the most difficult days of my career, having to go in there and talk to my boss about that.
Yeah. And it also shows the employer and how, that we have to create this flexibility because, that's a very real home life situation. And there is that point where there's a trade-off that many of us don't want to make, right? And for good reasons.
And I think a lot of people would have been very hesitant to have that conversation because they would have been afraid of how their employer might react. So it is important as leaders, I think, that we set that kind of atmosphere where our employees feel like they can have those hard conversations and that we're going to work with them and figure out the best way to approach those kinds of things.
So when you went and you asked for that, were you prepared that the outcome could have been that you may be out of a job? I mean, is that what had to go through your mind?
Oh, yeah. I honestly thought that I would lose that job because I didn't have any security experience. It wasn't like they could move me on to another project. I was bringing, I think, capability to the table, but no experience, no expertise. So, yeah, I fully expected I was going to be leaving there without a job that day.
So what motivates you to continue to push for success?
Ever since that 9/11, ever since this all started and I entered the security field, it's never gotten better. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And it's so important that we grow expertise in this field, that we continue to fight the good fight, because it could be much worse. While it's not getting better, the adversaries are getting stronger and more sophisticated, but so are we. I look at 9/11 and they thought the Olympics would be the next victim, but it wasn't. And same with cyber. Yes, there are a lot of victims out there, but there are a lot of people that aren't. And so we have to all work together to win this battle.
Mhm. Yeah. So you've had in winning this battle, you've had many different situations where you've had to stand up for something that was right, you know, that you felt was right versus wrong. Do you have any examples, or how do you do that? How do you stand up for the right thing to do?
I think if you are working in security, that's kind of your job. um, as a security, there are security purists that always want to do exactly what should be done. But in reality, we always have to balance security with risk, with productivity. And so it's not right from wrong so much as what's the right thing to do. And so I find that, for instance, when I come up against a risk and I have to go to a leader and I have to convince them to fix it or to pay to have it fixed, if they do push back, a lot of times it's because they don't understand the risk. So I try to explain it very clearly. Here's what could happen. Here's other cyber threats that are happening, which shows that it really could happen. Here's the probability, and here's the quantified potential impact if it did happen. So I find that using, like, really quantifying risk helps, but then you need an escalation process, because you will run into people that still just either can't afford it, don't have the time or the resources, or they just don't get it. And then you have to escalate.
How do you avoid becoming hi, my name is Dawn. I am the queen of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and the sky is falling. How do you avoid being that person versus being the one that they're coming to trust, that when you come to them, you have something that is really a risk?
Well, one thing that I'm a strong believer in is, as a CISO, you should tell your employees what is happening at your company. And so we do security awareness training, we do briefs, we do Yammer posts. We let people know, if we have an employee whose account was compromised, we tell everyone we had an employee whose account was compromised, and here's how it happened. And this could happen to you because this was a very sophisticated attack. And so here's what you need to be aware of. So I think by actually, instead of just spreading FUD, we talk about this has really happened at Rockwell. And so it is happening to us. You can't read the news and say, oh, well, that doesn't happen here. It does happen here. And so I think that builds up some trust that you're not just talking about these things that are happening out there. You're actually tying it to your own company.
Do you find it now? You work with a lot of technical people. Do you find that technical people want to hang on to the correct thing that must be done, or do you find that you're having to give some education as to what may be acceptable or not?
Oh, yes. Yeah, sometimes it's very hard for people to understand why we're not doing this. We should be doing this and we're not. And what's really interesting is a lot of times I think it's really important for security people to go to security conferences, especially those that may be a little, like maybe mid-career, because security people tend to see everything you're not doing that you should be. And then you go to a security conference and you come back and say, we're actually pretty good. All these talks I went to, we're doing a lot of the things that people are talking about. So maybe we're not so bad after all.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good sharing at security conferences, and I've always told people you have to allocate the time. Sometimes technical people get very busy and can't get out of the office, and but you may miss something that you can pick up at a conference that can save months of work and going in the wrong direction.
Right. And just building those networks. And, I'm all for these virtual conferences. I have to say that's one benefit of COVID. It used to be you had your travel and your training budget. And so you had to pick, what am I going to do this year? And some of those conferences are expensive, and, the hotel rates are jacked up because they know they have the whole city hostage. And that can be a very expensive proposition. With virtual conferences, have been so many free opportunities this year. I tell my team all the time, take advantage of those. You can sit in on a 1-hour webinar that in the past you would have had to have traveled and lost 2 days or 3 days of work to go and watch, or you can just take an hour out and watch it. So that plus a lot of networking opportunities. Building those networks is essential so that we can all work together to figure out the security issues.
Yeah, I think of how many people I've met through conferences is a lot, and that becomes your network that you rely on when you have an issue that you need to solve.
Right, exactly.
So it's been said that we learn more from our project failures than our successes. What have you learned that you wish you would have known earlier in your career?
So I had to think long and hard about that one, Todd. I think the biggest thing I came up with was, I think back to young Dawn and at Westinghouse. I was sent to assertiveness training because I was so quiet. And one of my managers actually made me write, in one of my goals and objectives was that I would say something at every meeting I attended, because he said, I know how good you are. I can see the programs you write. I can see you're innovative, but you sit in meetings and you don't say a word. So I am going to be watching you, and I want to see you say something at every meeting. So I'd be sitting there in an hour meeting of 55 minutes thinking, oh my gosh, I have to say something. But then as I started saying things, I realized, they're not rolling their eyes and they're not looking at me like I'm stupid. And so I gained a little bit of confidence. And then I went to CERT, and here I am, one of like a handful of women in hundreds of members of the CERT technical staff that are men. And they're very smart, very strong security experts in CERT. That was very intimidating. And again, I had to really force myself to try and earn their respect. And working on insider threats, with all of these very technical security experts, they used to say, oh, insider threat, that's that soft science. It's not a hard science. And with our Secret Service team, we started out with 10 people working on insider threat. And then after the project was over, it whittled down to 3 because everybody said, this people problem is not very interesting. And then Andy, Randy, and Dawn, Andy Moore, Randy Trezak, and myself, we ended up writing the book, The CERT Guide to Insider Threats. We were passionate and felt like, you know what, I think we have something here. I think this is a big problem, and I think we can solve it. And so we persevered and built the Insider Threat Center, which ended up being the world center of insider threat expertise. And so I got that confidence there. But then I go to Rockwell, and here I am after 25 years in a university. I'm in a private company. I don't know how to act with senior vice presidents and the CEO and the board. And so once again, I had to overcome that self-doubt and that lack of confidence. So throughout my whole career, I have had to do that over and over again. And so I just encourage people, you can do it. You can overcome that. And so just persevere and don't be afraid.
And it's a very insightful piece about, being in the room and then making a comment. And, we all expect that everybody that's in a leadership position is naturally extroverted and wants to do that. But many times in these meetings, the most insightful comment will come out of somebody that's been in the meeting, that's been listening, because they haven't been talking. They've been listening the whole time and processing about what to say. And so as leaders, it's important to draw that out, right? And you were
Right.
taught that early on.
Yeah, exactly. I actually had a manager once who said to me, when I first came here, I used to look at you and think, I don't think she's very good. She's very quiet. And then I would notice that you would sit back, but then you would say something towards the end of the meeting. And I'd think, wow, that was really innovative. And I realized that you don't just blurt things out like a lot of people do. You actually think about it before you say it. Now I think I tend to blurt things out more. I finally got the confidence to do that. But yeah, you're right. And it's important as a leader to make sure that you are recognizing that some of those people that work for you need to be drawn out. And maybe give them that objective, make them say something in every meeting. It worked for me.
I think that's a great tip. And who knows, we probably wouldn't have the insider threat knowledge that we have today had you been quiet in those early meetings.
True, true.
Well, so you've done a phenomenal piece of work, and I know that you wrote a piece for the CISO Compass book, which we've also turned into a podcast for the new series that the Cybersecurity Collaborative has put out. We have a new podcasting series called CISO Stories, and that will be coming out next month. On where you talk about insider threat, and there's one piece since you have conveyed that wisdom on me, I have probably told countless number of people if they're looking at funding an insider threat program. And I don't know if you recall, but you had a nice little gem there, and you told me how you get funding for an insider threat program. And it started with going to HR. Do you remember that comment?
Wow, that was a year ago, right? RSA.
Yeah, we started that, yeah. But it had to do with getting a list of people that had departed in the last 90
Yes.
days.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. That's my usual answer, but I don't remember saying go to HR. But that is what I tell people. If you're having trouble getting buy-in to start an insider risk program, we know most people, based on our research at CERT and based on now, I've been at Rockwell since 2013. So now 8 years of actually implementing all of the work we did at CERT. I can tell you that most people that steal intellectual property do it within 30 to 90 days of when they leave the company. So I tell people, go to HR, get a list of people that have left the company in the last 30 to 90 days, and just go back, ask your IT department if they can run you a report, look at USB activity, look at emails sent outside the network, look at files moved into cloud environments and file sharing environments. And every company I have told to do this, they've always come back and said, oh my gosh, Dawn, I can't believe what we found. And you don't want to find it that way. You don't want to find it after they've left. You need to find it before they leave so you can get it back. So yeah, that's what I tell people, Todd, and it works.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And so that's an example, I think, of how you have created something that is useful for the entire cybersecurity community, and you've advised our governments, some national authorities on how to do this kind of stuff. So, how important is it, do you think, for cybersecurity people to give back to the community?
Oh, I think it's imperative. maybe it's because of my roots, but starting my security career in CERT, the mission of CERT is to help the world. In CERT, it's a federal lab, and so you can't do work for an individual company and just give them the results. You can only do work for an individual company if you're going to publish the results for the good of all. And so when I went to Rockwell, I said to them, I am really intrigued by this position at Rockwell, and I would love to do it, but I need to be able to continue that outreach, because I strongly believe that in security, like, there's no competitive advantage to a company from security. This is truly something that we all need to work on together and share best practices. And, you know, if Rockwell does it better than our competitors, that's not good, because our competitors create industrial control systems too. So we don't want their products tampered with either. So I think Rockwell's great about that. That's why I'm able to do these things, because they believe in giving back. But we have to all work on this together. It's imperative. We can't do it alone.
And I know you're serving on the executive committee for the Cybersecurity Collaborative too, which we appreciate getting those insights so that we can make sure that we're building the right products and right services for CISOs so that we can collaborate together.
Yeah, and I am really appreciative of having that collaborative, because you know, the working groups that you have going are just so valuable. Because of that executive committee, they are addressing areas that are of concern across the board. And new things like solar winds just happened. And we realized, and a lot of people in the community realized, that the novel part of the solar winds attack was how they attacked the build environment of solar winds. And the fact that they could just pick up what they did there and they could use it again in any company in their own build environments is that's a huge threat.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no best practices right now for what to do about that. So we started a group through the collaborative to work on that together. And so I think it's essential. And once we come up with some best practices, we can put them out there to help everyone.
Yeah, and we appreciate you leading that. So what are some of the people, if you had to look to, that have inspired you in your career?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's Bob Pingle who works for me that's leading that working
Mm-hmm.
group. I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
There are two people that really I credit in my career, and one of them is the Secret Service agent that I worked with on that very first security project, Cornelius Tate. He worked for the Secret Service. He was detailed to CERT. And, you know, remember, I'm new to security. 9/11 just happened. Even though I wasn't going to go to Salt Lake City, I still was responsible for the team that was figuring out how to protect the Olympics. And he is the one that really instilled in me that passion for security and the cyber and physical convergence, because that was the big thing that we were looking at. How could cyber be used to cause physical harm? And so we would just sit in his office every day and we would look at what's happening in the world. What do we see, and how do we need to tie that into what we're doing? And that I still do that all the time. I read the collaborative newsletters that I get every morning, and I look and think, what do we need to do because of that? I'm not just reading it because it's interesting. It's all, you have to apply it to what you're doing. And I think I got that from Cornelius, as well as just that, you know, the Secret Service, that drive to protect. And then there was Sally Cunningham, who was a manager that I had at Carnegie Mellon. Growing up in, you know, being one of the few females in software engineering and then in security, I tried very hard to be one of the guys. You know, I got into sports because they talked about sports, and I must say I still love sports, but But, you know, I felt like I have to talk their language. And so I need to, even though I don't really like hockey, I better start watching hockey. Um, and then I met Sally, started working with her, and she would come into meetings and start talking about her kids. And, what do you know? Those guys that were talking about hockey, they happen to also have kids. And so she would walk in and talk about what her son did at school that day. And all of a sudden, you have this whole conversation about families and kids. And I thought, I think I could just try being myself instead of trying to be one of the guys. I think I can actually be myself. And I opened up, like, who is Dawn really outside of work? And it's totally changed how I just work in general, work and how I lead and just how I interact with people and build relationships. So I credit that to Sally.
That's, I mean, that's very interesting. And what do you see for, women coming up in the field today? Are there obstacles that, are there things that they should be doing different that you see than what they are?
Um, I think it depends. I read a lot about this, and the imposter syndrome, and I think women do need to stick together. So I try and mentor young women inside and outside of Rockwell. Um, and I guess my advice is you can do it, and you can be who you are. I had a lot of conflict when I was like a new mom with young kids, work versus home, and I kind of killed myself, honestly, trying to be super mom and super employee. It's paid off well. I have a wonderful family and I have had a wonderful career. It was exhausting, but you can do it. You can do it. But there were times when the kids came first, and there were times when work came first. So I think just that flexibility is really important. But I have to say, one of the best days of my life was when I went to one of the kids' parties at school, in elementary school, like a Halloween party. And one of the moms said to me, I thought you worked full time, but you never miss anything. You're always here anytime there's an event at school. And that was because I made sure I worked for a company or the university, a place that was flexible and that would accommodate my need to balance home and work. But then if you're all about work, that's great. If you're all about home, then that'll be a bigger struggle.
I once worked for a company that one of my staff asked if he could have off at 9:30 on a Monday morning to go to have donuts with dad at his school. And I was thinking, I thought, boy, when I was younger, would I have ever asked my boss off for a Monday morning to go have donuts? It was just so different. Well, of course I said yes. Please do. And
Mhm.
then he comes back and he says, "You'll never guess what? Who was there also at the Donuts for Dad? The president of the company." So, so it was a good decision, I guess. But,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, and so sometimes I think we think that, and I've been in meetings where one of the large security conferences that I know that you speak at as well, that they had a bunch of the speakers and they were giving some additional training to, and somebody mentioned that we're afraid of the imposter syndrome. And I'm looking around the room at who's saying this. And it was amazing to me that all of these people were very well qualified, but the imposter syndrome. And so I think, it takes courage, I think, for you to mention the imposter syndrome, because I think everybody has it to some degree.
Right, right. And we have to just get over it.
Yeah.
But the key is never pretend you know something you don't. That's what, when I interviewed at CERT, I talked to my old boss who worked in CERT at the time, but I worked for him before he went to CERT. And I said, I'm interviewing at CERT this week. Do you have any advice? And he said, I have one piece of advice. If you don't know something, you just say, I don't know. Because if you try to pretend you know something you don't, they will see through you and they'll just cut the interview. They'll just say, it's done. You're out of here. And I've seen them do that in CERT. That's their big thing. If you don't know, that's okay. Just say you don't know. And so I think that is key. That way, you don't have to have the imposter syndrome. Everyone knows what you don't know because you admit it.
Absolutely. Well, we've got some remaining questions. I think we're going to flip over to some more questions from the chat that we have. And while we're doing that, and while we continue, we've got 3 questions we'd like to ask everybody. So Scott, if you could, put those poll questions up while we're asking these questions, we'll be glad to go ahead with this. So what tips would you give for building a very effective security team?
Oh, I love that question because a few years ago, my boss, Becky House, made all of her leaders read a book called The Ideal Team Player. And I highly recommend that book. It talks about the traits in the ideal team player. And those traits are hungry, humble, and smart. Hungry meaning the person wants to succeed. They're ambitious. They want to do good work. Humble is pretty obvious. Smart does not mean book smart. It means people smart, like emotional IQ. You want people who can read people. Because in security, especially, you have to be able to read people. If someone is like tuning you out and disagrees with what you're saying, you better figure out another way to approach them if you really need them to make a certain decision, like we talked about before. So hungry, humble, and smart. Whenever we interview anyone for our team, I always tell them, for each candidate, I want you to talk about those 3 traits. You can look at everything else you want to look at, but I want to know hungry, humble, smart. And it really resonates and it really works well.
Good advice. We have poll question number 2. Did you learn something today that you can implement immediately? I have a question about the insider threats. From John says, you say you check on people who have left. What do you look for to see the bad behavior before someone leaves? Do you just doubt everyone?
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. There's now technology called User Entity Behavior Analytics, UEBA. You can get a UEBA tool that will pull all of these data feeds together, and you can include termination date as a data feed. And this is what we do at Rockwell. And so it's not like not trusting everyone, but it's objectively pooling all of this data into one system so that the system calculates a risk score for everybody every day. And if you don't have a termination date set, then you're not as risky as if you do. If you copy files to USB drives all the time, which we have a lot of engineers that's how they take their work to our customers, then it has anomaly detection. So it knows, oh, for Dawn, yeah, she does that all the time. So her risk score is down here. But this person has never done that before, and they're leaving the company. Their risk score shoots up to the top. So it's nice if you can invest in analytics like that. If you can't, the way I started out at Rockwell was just saying to HR, when someone announces their resignation or they're going to be terminated and they have access to our critical IP, just tell me, and we'll go off and we'll run reports. We'll look at USB activity, cloud activity, email activity. And if we see something, then we'll investigate. We'll work with HR and the manager to determine if we have a problem. So that's how you can go about it. And it's very objective. There's nothing subjective about it. And it's not that we don't trust people, but I can tell you a lot of people most of what we see is people that just don't know it's not, you're not allowed. Like some people, especially during COVID, they want to be good employees. They want to back that laptop up and they're not in the office. So they can't back it up with a USB drive from Rockwell. So they grab one out of their drawer, and we just can't let them do that. You know, we can't have our confidential information on a removable media device when the person could leave the company next week. So it's not like we're doing anything punitive or that we're accusing them of anything malicious, but we just need to make sure that they follow our policies.
What single thing do you recommend for demonstrating the value of a security program from Robert?
Well, I think as you stop things, like I said before, we talk about what we are dealing with. We talk about the incidents that happen, but we also talk about the ones that don't. So a few years ago, the New York Times announced that Russia had compromised our power grid, had compromised a bunch of companies in the the energy sector through a watering hole attack. Well, when we told our leadership that our vendor of one of our security tools told us that we had 33 employees that went to that watering hole and could have been compromised by Russia, but luckily our technology stopped it. That's pretty powerful. And those kinds of, you don't have to quantify that. You just tell them we have 33 employees that could have been compromised, like those people in that New York Times article, but they weren't. That's powerful. I like stories, as you may have noticed.
Yeah, stories. It's a great leadership skill to relate those into stories. So from Jonathan, we have what's the most important thing you consider when choosing vendors and integrators?
Well, I like to go with the best in breed. That's where you have some conflicts because they're not always the cheapest. But there are certain technologies that are critical to our security program that they enable me to sleep at night. And we have had IT say, hey, we could go with these cheaper alternatives and you'd have the same capability, and then would have more money for other things. And that's one where I just will fight tooth and nail to keep some of our vendors that really are top notch. So to me, for the critical technologies, we do our homework and really look for the best.
We have another question here. What do you think of a mid-career internal auditor with no experience in the cybersecurity field to land in the very field as his career target? And what could he do to make it happen? Or is it a bit too late?
Oh, no, it's not too late. There's a huge shortage of cybersecurity people, so it is definitely not too late. I would approach your CISO because I have employees that will just email me and say, I'm interested in security. Would you mind just talking to me for half an hour about what I might do? And we kind of talk through what their position is now, how they may be able to get involved in some security programs. A lot of leaders, there's a talent war going on right now for all kinds of talent. And so a lot of corporate leaders are aware that we want to keep our people happy or else they're going to leave. They can leave, especially with COVID. They don't even have to move. They can leave and work remotely for another company. So I've said to some employees at Rockwell, talk to your leaders and see if they'll let you get involved in security. We have a security ambassador program where we have ambassadors all over the world working in every position from admin positions to principal engineers that help us to spread our security message. So I would say approach your manager and approach your CISO and just find out what you can do to help. Any CISO will say that security awareness is critical to a security program. And so if you're interested in security, you can become that conduit to your part of the company so that you can help to spread the security message. And then you start establishing yourself as, hey, that guy knows about security. Let's go ask him what he thinks. And the next thing you know, there may be a position open that you have enough of a foundation that you can apply for.
What do you think is the most interesting technological shift in cyber, and how's that affected the culture of cybersecurity?
I think AI and machine learning, that is it's enabling us to rely on the machine to do a lot of what we had to do ourselves in the past. I don't think we could survive these days with the sophisticated adversaries we have without having these vendors that are supplying artificial intelligence and machine learning in their security technology. I think we have to just keep automating as much as we can in order to stay ahead of the adversaries.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic, Dawn, and really appreciate you taking the time. I do want to ask you one last question. You know, where we are today, if you were to look into Dawn's crystal ball 5, 10 years out and look at the environment of cybersecurity and laws and regulations, where do you see this field in that time?
I think we're going to become more regulated. SolarWinds has really opened the eyes of the government regarding sharing of cybersecurity and incident information. We keep hearing about needing more information sharing, and I think the community is getting a lot better. I see the US government getting a lot better about information sharing. I get emails from NSA, DHS, and FBI every day with something. So I think that's getting much better, but I think we're going to probably have to start reporting back when things happen to us in some fashion. And I think it's probably critical so that we can stay ahead of the adversaries, but we just have to be careful of how that reporting is going to work, to who, how will it be handled, et cetera.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dawn, for sharing your time. And I do want to mention we have the new website up for the Cybersecurity Collaborative at cyberleadersunite.com. People may want to check that out and see what the services are there. But Dawn, it's been fantastic, and thanks for your leadership in this industry, and not just helping the company that you work for, but taking the time in your presentations and the creation of documents and to help all of us be able to manage our security programs better.
You're welcome. Thanks for this opportunity, Todd. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.